All right, we're going to talk about attachment in this section. It's freezing in my classroom right now, so you know. So I'm going to wear this jacket. But attachment basically is an emotional tie with another person. And of course, ideally, that's what will happen with a well-adjusted young child and their parents. Okay. It is shown in young children by seeking closeness to the caregiver and showing distress on separation. So that's a good thing to an extent. If kid is scared, they seek out their parent for, reassurance. Okay. Now we're going to get into Harlow and his studies. Harlow's a researcher, and he did what was known as the surrogate mother experiments, where he used Rhesus monkeys. Right there, it's the same. I think it's the same monkeys that passed on AIDS, but talk for another time. But what they found was he did all these different things. This is sort of a little snapshot of what he did. He did all kinds of things, trying to figure out what happens when animals, primates, which of course we're part of, are raised in isolation, or without their mother, or with surrogate mothers. And actually, this is one of the experiments that we were talking about over time, that as to the ethics of doing things to animals. It really brought about some changes in how we go about doing research, because he literally would raise these monkeys in like a complete isolation chamber, nothing. They had no stimulation whatsoever, and to see what would happen to them. And I mean, at the time, he was curious: would they sort of raise themselves and become normal monkeys, or would they have problems? And of course, they had pretty big psychological problems. Anyway, one of the things he did is, in this case, he found that monkeys prefer a surrogate mother that has a warm carpet surrounding here. The one on the right here, this monkey here, has a sort of a carpet body. That's reassuring, because it's probably soft and warm, and something that they can cuddle into. And when the monkey was scared, that's where the monkey would go. And when the monkey just wanted to be reassured or just hang out, it hung out on the carpeted monkey. Now, in this particular experiment, he had a cage monkey, a wire monkey, okay, that had food, and he was wondering, is the draw of food stronger than the draw of just sort of being reassured? And while, of course, we need food, and the monkey would seek out the wire mother for food, if it would either go to the monkey, the wire monkey, for food, simply to get the food, then return to the soft carpeted monkey, or if they were close together, it would try to stay on as much as it could, the carpeted monkey, while stretching to get food from the wire monkey, as you can see here. So it really showed that the mother-child relationship is much more than simply, oh, this is a food provider for me, and that's what makes me love my mom or attached to my mom. There's much more to it. There's a comfortableness that goes with it, a nourishing. Okay. Infants also become attached to people who provide security in time of need. That makes sense. Starting with a little baby. When a baby cries, and the parents come into the room and help the baby with whatever's going on, or try to, the baby learns to become attached to those who help it out or hold it for long periods of time, the smells and so on and so forth. Security, okay, when they're scared, or if they get upset, if the mom picks them up and is cooing, or the dad. I don't mean to hold dads back, but soothing, patting, feeding, rocking, all this stuff for a human baby, creates security. Oh, I feel better. Okay, I was scared. I'm okay now. All right, how long do we have to develop this bond? Early on in life, there seems to be a very important period of time that you have to be with your child. You have to hold your child. Otherwise, it starts opening the door, and the percentage of chances go up as the child receives less and less nourishment and response when in time of need. So you want to start doing this right away. And most people hold their babies as soon as they're born, so it's not really an issue in that sense. But again, I think the text was talking about in other nations, parts of the world, they were specifically referenced Africa. They say that before the mother ever gets to hold the baby, it's passed around to several other women in their tribe or village or wherever they're living. And so the baby receives a lot of smells that it becomes accustomed with, and so it feels very comfortable with many of the people in the village, and that thus bringing forth the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, okay? So, moving on. Now, this brings up the critical period of time. Is there an optimal period after birth when an organism's exposure to certain stimuli experiences produces proper development? And we have found, to some extent, yes. And in the text, as well as some of the videos you've watched, they're talking about Romanian orphans. And they have found Romanian orphanages are not the best places to be. They tend to be sort of housing areas. The mothers give up the baby. The orphanages are overworked. They do not have the staff, and they just put the babies in cribs. And by and large, many times, they're not really paid much attention to other than to keep alive. So there's not a lot of, the rocking and the holding and and all that going on. And many of these, it just depends. In the resiliency of the baby, they can start to develop some real psychological issues. They don't bond well with people, and that can last throughout the rest of their life, and it's kind of a scary thing. All right, so that's critical period. What we have noticed about human beings is familiarity is important. Familiarity breeds content. So the more you're exposed to things as a child, the more you feel comfortable with it. So, of course, parents, makes sense. It even goes with food. I mean, think about some of the foods that you don't like. Many times it has to do with your exposure to them. If you grow up and they're sort of rare, or maybe it's a smell you don't really get used to, you may grow up and be like, I can't eat that. For me, it's some curry stuff. I have trouble with it. I want to try it, but I have a lot of trouble eating it. Raw fish. I try the sushi. It's just not me. My wife and I, we always want to be more, I don't know what the word is, trendy, but we just cannot eat sushi. Both of us have tried several times. It just doesn't work. Imprinting. So we're talking about, at this point, what animals do. They imprint on their parents very quickly after birth. It tends to work best within a species, but there has been studies done, and I know you'll see in the book, where you can actually imprint cross species. And one guy actually had a bunch of geese, I think it was, or ducks, and he was the first thing that these little baby ducks saw when they hatched. They imprinted on him, and then he raised them as best he could, and then he was able to get one of these little tiny airplanes that you can build, very, very small, and he would take off in it, and these ducks would literally form that V wedge behind him and fly with him. So that's kind of cool. I mean, it's really unusual. Human beings do not imprint, okay? Much, I'm sure, to the disappointment of those Twilight fans who, wish to have Jacob imprint to them, or them to Jacob, or whatever. Anyway, that does not happen, okay? I can't believe I referenced that. But we do definitely, we do become very, very attached to those that raise us, and their smells and the way of that they do things. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, attachment. We have different types of attachment. We have secure attachment and insecure attachment. Let me see what I got here. Secure attachment, okay? That's when, how does this go? Let me just read this to you. Placed in a strange situation, in a laboratory, for instance, About 60% of infants that will display secure attachment. In their mother's presence, they play comfortably, happily exploring their new environment. When she leaves, they are distressed. When she returns, they seek contact with her. And usually it's just to sort of verify, hey, you're back. Hey, okay, okay, I'm gonna come over, I'm gonna touch it, boom, okay, everything's good, I'm gonna keep playing now. Now, insecure attachment, okay? Other infants show insecure attachment. They are less likely to explore their surroundings. They may even cling to their mother. When she leaves, they either cry loudly and remain upset or seem indifferent to their mother's going and returning. So it gets to the point where if they're insecurely attached, the mother leaves, some of them will just curl up into a ball and just sit there, and they're literally frozen. They don't know what to do. And if the mother's in the room, they won't explore the room. They won't see what's going on out there. Hey, there's toys over there. I want to check that out. So you want your children willing to, it's a sign that your children are willing to take chances on their own. And, think about that as you grow up. In order to learn anything new, you have to take a chance. To take this class, you had to take a chance. I heard it was hard and it's an AP class, but I want the information. I want to try it. So you're trying it. So that's a secure attachment. If you have an insecure attachment, you'd be more like, well, I'm too afraid to fail. The thought of failure immobilizes me. I won't do anything. Okay. So the question is, does sensitive mothering matter? And it definitely does. You want to develop your children to take chances and learn about the world the best that they can when given the opportunity. Okay, and here's an example of a rhesus monkey that was raised by artificial mothers. Is terror-stricken when placed in strange situations without their surrogate mothers. So in this sense, here's an insecure attachment. This monkey is so freaked out by just being alone, it doesn't even know what to do. And so, typical of young monkeys or humans, if you close you don't exist out there. If I can close my eyes and cover my face, I can't see you, so you don't exist, and I'll just sit here and wait for the world to happen to me. Okay? Kind of sad. All right, the idea of if you don't have a mother, it's called maternal deprivation. The idea that, that's so important, that mother-child bond, whether it's a male or female child. The father being gone is just known as an absence, as if fathers not being present are sort of doesn't make a difference. That's the way it used to be. And what they're finding now is that they've changed their view on this, a lot of psychologists. Again, earlier on, mothers are the nurturers, and fathers were simply, to be a father, all you had to do is impregnate a woman, and by definition, you're a father. That they didn't seem to have more of an elaborate definition of fathering is actually, there's nurturing going on with the father, and there's teaching going on with the father as well. But that is starting to really change so that people understand that it's important to have a male point of view and a male role model in the family so that the children grow up seeing both mother and father ways of looking and doing it, looking at things and doing things. Okay. All right, here, effects of attachment. Secure attachment predicts social competence, and we're talking about in the future. So you have a baby or a child, toddler, that demonstrates secure attachment. What you're looking at is possibly in the future seeing how that child's going to interact with other people. They're learning to deal with the world as it is and deal with the ups and downs. You're going to have, you're not going to get along with everybody that you would like to get along with, and you're going to have to hopefully work your way through that and not just give up or not even try. And so Strauss is the guy that we're looking at now. Let me see if I can, where did I put it? Yes, Strauss. Okay, he identified infants who were securely attached at 12 to 18 months of age, so securely attached. He restudied these infants at 2 to 3 years old, so he waited a while and then came back to them, okay? And he saw them functioning more confidently than other toddlers. Given challenging tasks, they were more enthusiastic and persistent. With other children, they were more outgoing and responsive, okay? So that's what he found. And that's huge, because you want your child taking chances and learning to interact with other people, because it's just going to mushroom from there and develop and develop and develop if they start off on a path of willing to take chances to be friends with other people, perhaps try to be friends with somebody that they're not comfortable with, and things like that. What was I going to say? Oh, one of the things that they've really done a lot of studying on lately is, and I might be off here, but you got to be careful how you talk to your children. And there was a long time where they kept, tell your children how smart they are. Tell them. And I'm not saying you should call your kids stupid. That's not what I mean. I don't mean the polar opposite of that. But you have to be careful with how you present what smart is. And I'm sure you either have experienced this a little bit, because it's not like I think all parents have done this, made this mistake, me included. You tell your child how smart they are because you're trying to instill a sense of you can do this. And don't let fear overwhelm you or give up. But what tends to happen is, what they're finding is if you bombard a kid with how smart they are, when they struggle with something, they shut down, because the fear of being considered not smart after their own identity has been established of, I am smart, and if I can't do this, then I might not be smart, and my parents may not look at me as smart, and everybody else won't. I'm not going to try to do this. So it's one of those it's a tight wire to walk, where you're trying to encourage your child, but not develop the sense that your whole worth is you are smart, and therefore you should get everything easy. It's not going to happen that way. We all have challenges. We all have things that we're not good at. And you have to work with your child to understand that's part of life. And if you want to be good at this, you can't give up, and you got to work through it. All right. Now we're going to go to just real quick. Erik Erikson, another big development theorist. He came up, which was kind of in conjunction with what Strauss did, saying a basic trust needs to be formed early on in life, a sense that the world is predictable and trustworthy, said to be formed during infancy by appropriate experiences with response caregivers. It's not, and what he's found, that even kids who have had some very traumatic things happen to them as children, if they somehow develop that sense that the world is a predictable and trustworthy place, when they get older and they have trouble in the world, and I don't mean like everything is positive. I mean, think about if you had a pretty good childhood, and then war broke out in your country. Okay, I know we tend to think of Americans all the time, but let's say war breaks out, and I mean, your home is trashed, people you all knew are dead, just the whole way of life that you had is completely disrupted, or perhaps even gone. Erik Erikson is saying, with that basic trust as part of who you are, you'll have that outlook of, yes, these times are tough, but I'm going to keep striving, because I'm going to get my life back to the way it was, or I'm going to create some semblance of my life as it was, or as good as it can be, because I believe that the world is predictable, that this is not going to go on, this war isn't going to go on forever. Those are the type of things that make people resilient. So that's why his basic trust philosophy is something that you should know, and it makes sense. Okay. Effects of attachment. All right, although still debated, many researchers believe that our early attachment experiences lay the foundation for our relationships. And again, debated, but the idea that when we first learn attachment, sort of your relationship with your parents will in turn, you'll develop either healthy or unhealthy relationships perhaps in your personal life when you're older. So you have, if you're somebody who has secure relationships, you're trusting. I trust my wife, okay? I think I have a secure relationship. I don't worry about where she is when she suddenly doesn't come home. As a matter of fact, she didn't come home yesterday. She was later coming home yesterday than I thought she was going to be. And my first thought wasn't, what is she doing? I just figured something came up, and nothing big. It turned out she went to the Publix. She just didn't tell me. And but if you had an insecure attachment, this is where, and I see this a lot with teenagers dating, okay, and it might just be a stage. I'm not sure I understand it, but whenever you can't find that significant other, that person that you're supposed to be with, something comes up or whatever, they suddenly feel jealous, they feel betrayed, they feel like something is being done behind their back, and that's their first instinct, and that's really not the best way to go through relationships. That is ultimately a recipe that's going to end up in a very toxic relationship, let's put it that way. So there's that. Then you have avoidance of attachment, and that's even worse. This is where you get people who, and some of you may have had this situation, they can be, there's two different ways to go here. I see it, it's more pronounced when you see the people who get into a relationship, they decide to date somebody, but then they sabotage it. And rather than really fall for someone, rather than really let go and say, I'm in, this, you and I are together and I'm in 100% and let's see where this goes. They sabotage it by doing silly things, either consciously or unconsciously, but they don't let the relationship blossom because the fear of being betrayed, the fear of losing the attachment if it should show up, is worse than avoiding it completely. So it's kind of like they're just, they keep everybody at arm's length, and even though there's some instincts to have a relationship, they won't really ever give in to it, and it's a sad state to be in. And usually it's a sign that something happened earlier in their life, not always, but usually that just so tragic. Something hurt them so bad they don't want to go through that hurt again. Okay? Attachment. All right, now we have the child rearing practices. There are 3 basic styles. We're almost done. Hang with me here. Okay? 3 basic styles: authoritarian, permissive, and authoritative. Authoritarian: do what I do, or do what I say because it's my house. And I'm sure all parents have to do this at some point. But if that's the predominant way you raise your children, there's problems with that. It's there's no discussion, I'm in charge, and it tends to lead children down a path that once they get to the teenage years there, those middle school years where it begins, the rebellion. They really rebel against any kind of authority, and it creates a very adversarial relationship. I'm in charge because I'm older, and you just have to live with it. It's not done to be mean necessarily. It's done to protect the child, but the child doesn't understand that. They just look at it as, you think you control my life, and you could when I was younger, but now that I'm older, you can't control me. And it's not the best way to go about interacting with another person. Then you have those parents who are permissive. Rather than confront their children on things that need to be confronted, stop doing homework, coming in later than they should have, flat out doing things that they shouldn't have, throwing rocks at each other or something. They become permissive. It's too much work. I get upset, they get upset, it goes back and forth, and these are parents who just more or less give up. They don't really, it's almost like the kid exists and the parents exist, but they're just sort of just rotating around each other. They're not really interacting, and that's not good either, because the child tends to grow up thinking that whatever they choose to do is okay because the parents never said anything, and that's setting your child up for some failure down the road, because obviously once they get a boss working, boss is usually going to say something to you, and they get very how dare you tell me how to do my job even though you're my boss type situation. And then you have authoritative, okay? And this is probably the ideal. This is what I try to do with my children. And it gets better as they get older. When they're younger, it's kind of hard to explain things to them, but it just means that you have rules, but then you explain the rules. And then you allow exceptions at times. The best example I have is my mother made me feel about this big one time when I first started to drive in high school. She told me the whole thing. I didn't have a lot of rules when I was in high school, but she did say, look, you're not going to have a curfew, which I'm sure most of you have to deal with. And I said, okay. And she goes, but I just want you to understand that what goes on, why there are curfews and why parents don't want to deal with their kids out, is not good. Most good things don't happen after midnight. And I was like, okay, but I was a kid thinking thought. And she goes, I want you to understand, I don't sleep. She said, I cannot get into a sleep if you are not home. And as a kid, I was like, well, thanks. And all I heard was no curfew and I'm awesome and my parents trust me. And of course, the first time I was able to go out with some friends, I pushed the limit. I didn't call, and we didn't have cell phones back then, so she couldn't call me. And I think I came rolling in around 3 a.m. I really hadn't done anything. It wasn't anything, traumatic or anything. I just stayed out with people and just hung out, and I honestly can't even remember. But I come rolling in thinking, it's quiet and it's nice to not have to worry about getting yelled at. And 3 o'clock in the morning, my mother is watching television, some idiotic show at 3 o'clock in the morning, sitting in a recliner when I walk in. And I'm like, oh, and I think to myself, oh, she's up. And I think I'm ready for her to just blast me. She stands up and she just looks at me and she says, I'm glad you're home. She turns off the television. She walks down the hall and goes to bed. And I mean, it spoke volumes to me. It made me realize she's not kidding. She really is stressed that I wasn't home. And of course, waiting till 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm sure her mind was racing. That was the first and last time I ever did that. And it worked extremely well because she explained to me what's going on. And then when I pushed the envelope, she made sure I understood what the deal is. Okay, so think about that. All right, and here we have a correlation between authoritative parenting and social competence in children. And you have this circular pattern here that you can see. You can read that for yourself. But basically, they have done studies that show when authoritative parenting is done by parents, the children tend to grow up and be more successful in their relationships and as parents themselves. So it's a circle, and this is a circle. You always talk about circles you don't want to keep continuing. This is one you want to keep continuing, and I'm trying. I hope to do these things with my children, and it seems to be working so far. They haven't run away yet. Last slide. Remember, correlation is not causation. There may be other reasons for differing parent styles. Sometimes just the genetic makeup of kids. Some kids just are more prone to being thrill-seeking or a million different things, and you might have to change how you parent. There was this great line in a movie that I remember watching. Your parents may know it. It's called Back to School, had Rodney Dangerfield. And there's this chauffeur. I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but anyway, there's this rough and gruff chauffeur that was talking to a college kid, and this college kid was frustrated with his dad because his dad came back to go to college with him and he didn't want him there. But the chauffeur was talking to him and said, look, your dad loves you. And he goes, I want you to understand, I had 2 kids. And I put one of them through college and I put the other one through a wall. And it just always stuck in my head that every kid is different and you can't treat any 2 kids the same. So when you tell your parents that it's not fair, you're treating them differently than me, sometimes that has to happen, and that is life. And the next thing we'll start is adolescence, and we'll go from there. Thanks, bye.